Okay, we've been sent another case here. In this particular case, our patient is missing a lower right first molar, tooth number 30, and we want to plan an implant there. So this case was submitted, and the notes on the submission were, can you please evaluate the implant for implant placement for this patient? My concerns are the bone on the buccal and the path of the nerve. I mapped the nerve, but it isn't totally clear. Regarding the bone, would you graft at placement, or is this not a good guided case? So, so we'll take a closer look at this. So the first thing, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought there. The first thing I always evaluate is what kind of guide. In this particular case, all four guides are an option: classic guide, Opti guide, Digi guide, and Seric guide. The classic guide I would rule out simply because I don't already have a scan with the bite plate in place, and quite frankly, it's not necessary. An Opti guide or a Digi guide would be great here. So then we need to have our Seric data. So we take a look, and we have more than adequate amount of Seric data captured to produce an Opti guide or a classic guide. We also have a virtual tooth taken a look at. So let's go ahead and take a look at our virtual tooth design here, and let's start with a little review of that. So one of the things I'm always critical about is our virtual planning of our tooth. And in this case, there are a couple of issues that I would like to correct. So one would be our gingival margins. I think the margin line should be drawn approximately like so, versus where they're drawn right now, which is right here. So I like to draw our tooth looking like how I intend it to come out. The other thing I could see here is that maybe in looking at this cusp over here is a little bit high, so I don't know if this was done with the benefit of opposing teeth. I do like to do my SSI designs with opposing teeth so I can get everything correct. So again, is that a big deal breaker? No, but again, just a little bit along those lines. And then the other thing I can take a look at here in evaluating this is our cusp tips line up pretty well, but I think our buccal contour right here is a little bit thick, which can mislead us in terms of centering the implant. So little things along those lines are certainly important. Now let's take a look at the implant plan that was submitted, and here we can see, and my first comment on this is a very common thing that I see, and that is this desire to avoid grafting. Now certainly grafting does have its drawbacks and potential areas of complication, but in my opinion, sinking the implant deeper is not always the right idea. Then there are a few instances where that is the right idea, but here also on the lateral tangential view we can see the bone level, and now what we have to look at, one of the things I look at in this case is how is my emergence going to look, like so, and then how much bone am I going to have to remove to allow this emergence, and how is that going to affect the interproximal bone on the adjacent teeth. So in this particular case, my preference would be to take my implant and put it in a little bit more ideal vertical placement. And then the only other thing, everything else looks pretty good. Our occlusal plane is pretty nice. If we wanted to be more perfect, we would do it like so. That would be a little bit better. But then that also brings into account the other thing here, which is in looking at this view right here, I can clearly see that we have greater distance right here versus right here. So one of the things I like to do to help me visualize that is I like to go ahead and put the sleeve on the implant, and I often allow the sleeve to help me see if I am properly centered. And here we can see that we have a little bit greater space here than here. So I would move this implant over to the mesial a little bit, and now we are starting to get it a little bit better. Okay, now one of the things that, and I'm going to break one of my own rules here, one of the things that we take into consideration, I'm sorry I'm a little scattered today, I'm just trying to take a look at everything, is I look at the emergence again, so I'll mentally draw that, and I would say that the emergence leaves a food trap here, right? So instead of moving this over to center it, I would move it back, get it centered between the roots, and then tilt the implant to get it centered. Now that will create our occlusal plane to be off, but what it will allow, which in this minor amount be more important, is having a better emergence and hygiene profile here. That's that. Now, in terms of the nerve, I think the nerve is a non-issue here. Also, I would go to a 5 millimeter wide implant. I think the nerve is a non-issue in this particular case. I think the nerve is right there. So I think, well, I take that back. The nerve may be right here actually on this particular one. So what I would do in this case again is move the implant up. I would probably go to an 8.5 millimeter implant in this particular case just to take any nerve chances out of it. But the likelihood that the nerve is that high up is unlikely if there's a root right here and a root right here. So not scientific by any means, but certainly I would say that this is our safe zone right here because of that root and that root. But again, it's always important to evaluate. I think our mental foramen is right here. So certainly, in my particular hand, since I can't clearly see it, I would go to an 8.5 millimeter implant. I'd place the implant right here. Now the only other thing I would correct is I would center this in the ridge a little bit more. I don't like the implants being this close to the cortical plate. So the good news is to do that, we're not in the central groove anyway, so we can just tilt our implant a little bit, and now we've got our implant significantly better centered, and we're ready to rock and roll in terms of having this implant a little bit more ideal placed now. So now in terms of grafting at the same time, that's going to be a personal decision. The most predictable way is always to graft and then place the implant, certainly when we're trying to do some lateral bulking. But we're seeing a lot of great results through some wonderful clinicians in doing simultaneous grafting using what's known as sticky bone, where they're mixing the IPRF with allograft bone material, using maybe a titanium mesh membrane to help maintain the space, maybe even the membrane with some tacks, and then getting some space there. So hopefully this helps, and I appreciate you sending in the case.